Hello my beautiful bookish friends, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a different kind of booktube video. Sorry, this hair is bothering me. Where I am going to talk to you guys about terms on booktube you need to know if you're going to start watching booktube, or if you want to start posting booktube/book talk videos. Both are really popular right now, and the communities are kind of thriving, and there's a lot of people coming into them. And I actually did a video like this about a year or two ago, I guess, at this point, where I talked about like the basic booktube terms that you need to know if you're going to start a channel or start watching booktube. So I completely forgot that I wanted to make it a series. So many people said it was super helpful to them, especially just getting into the community and hearing things like TBR without context, or ARC, or DNF, like all of those things just didn't make sense to people. So I decided that I'm going to do, I'm going to take each genre and give you some terms that you need to know. So I will link my initial one if you are doing research for starting your own channel. I will link it in this video so that you can watch that one as well. You don't have to watch that one before this one. But today we are going to be talking about romance book terms. So obviously, in general, a romance novel is considered a book that focuses on a romantic relationship between people. I'm not going to say two people, because sometimes it's more than that. It just depends on the type of book you're reading. But within romance, we have a lot of subgenres, and I think I hit almost all of them. If there's ones that you consider like a subgenre, let me know down below, and we can discuss. So first and foremost, one of the most popular I would say is your contemporary romance. These are books that are happening now. They are the website said, I looked up the actual definition of a contemporary romance, and it said anything after 1945. I think that's a really broad time frame, and I would consider 1950s and 60s and stuff historical at this point. So I would say, personally, I find contemporary anywhere from happening now, in modern times, to maybe the 90s. Then we have historical, which is listed as before 1945, which I think is pretty common. Now, usually anything historical romance-wise, I have found to be set in World War II or the 19th century. So you're talking America really going through the Industrial Revolution. You have, trying to think, nobility was still very prominent in the 19th century, all that kind of stuff happening. And then before 45, you're probably getting a lot of war stories as well. Then we have fantasy romance. So think your Blood and Ash, from Blood and Ash stories of the world. These are happening in a fantasy world, very fantastical, very fantasy based. There's probably different kingdoms or countries and made up cultures and languages and maybe dragons and monsters. But the main focus of the story is there is still a romance happening. It just happens to be going on in all of these times. The Shadow Between Us is also a good example of a fantasy romance where someone has magical powers and someone else is a child of nobility, and they get involved with each other. Perfect example of a fantasy romance. A suspense romance, obviously, this is going to be your mysteries that are going on, but there's also a romance. I guess cozy mysteries could kind of fall under these because there is a mystery at the forefront, but the romance is taking a backseat, but it's definitely happening. So I guess it's still a mystery. But a mystery romance, there's a relationship going on. Someone's in love with a detective. They're partners on the case. And, you're focused on their relationship, but then there's also this overarching danger happening at the same time. Then we have the inspirational romances. These are your, I always see them in the Christian section of Barnes & Noble. It's usually a faith-based romance two people are pulled apart for some reason, they come together, and there's usually some sort of religious aspect there, like their belief in Christianity, their faith in Jesus, like they come together, and I usually see they're very like Christian based. Then we have your speculative romances. These are your aliens, your ghosts, your AIs, your sci-fis, all happening, but still at the forefront, the romances. So like Iceland Barbarians is really big right now, or Ice Planet Barbarians is really big right now. Those are your speculative romances. There's some sort of other worldly or future or technological aspect that is aiding to push the romance story along. Of course, we have YA, young adult. What makes a YA romance a romance is, I would say, there is usually a really strong friend group involved. It's very dramatic, and it's a very quick boom, boom, boom sort of love story. You know, they get together, they fight, they break up, they get back together. Like, very quickly. I'm trying to think of one that I have read, but I can't think of one. Because I don't read a lot of YA romance. I read a lot more of, like, adult romance. Erotica. Erotica is just, like, smut. On page, graphic, no details spared. These are your Katie Robert books of the world. Your Desperate Measures, Learn My Lesson, those kind of things where there isn't really a whole lot of character development or plot or insight into their relationship beyond the physical, sexual relationship. Bodice Ripper, which I think is like the best way to classify a book. This is the books that came out in, like, you know, when you think of a romance book, those little tiny mass markets with like Fabio on the cover from the 80s and 90s. These usually take place in like the 18th, 19th century, where women are dressed in these very big, like, bodice dresses. Pirates, Highlanders, royalty of some kind, those are all your Bodice Ripper books. There's usually a step back in the books. When you open it, there's like this grand scene where she's like laid across something, you know, you're picturing what I'm putting out there. Mafia romances, pretty easy to guess what that's about. Your main love interest is involved in the mafia somehow, and it's usually a very tumultuous, dangerous relationship. These are the books where you really see your captors, captee relationships happening, like they take the girl or they buy the girl, because usually the guy's in the mafia. I'd love to see it reversed. That could be cool. MCCs. So this is your motorcycle club romances. So if someone says they're reading an MCC, it's a motorcycle club romance, or MCRs, motorcycle club romance, however people describe it. This means the main love interest is in a motorcycle club, and, you know, the other person gets involved. Again, usually there's some sort of danger, there's gang violence. Think Sons of Anarchy in novel form. Taboo romances. That would be your scandalous sort of relationships. So you're looking at teacher student, usually they're like professor student or TA student, but that kind of dynamic. Your age gap romances, someone is way older than the other. Brother and sister's friend, not brother and sister, the friend of a brother or sister, of like your friend, so like the best friend's brother. Step siblings getting together, that's a big one for people, or a step parent and step child. Again, not everyone's cup of tea, but they do exist. Or friend's parent, just straight up like your best friend's mom. Then of course you have your female romances, which again, pretty self-explanatory, but I will say that is your like lesbian relationship or your bisexual relationships, whereas a woman and a woman, and then you have male, same thing, two men in a relationship. Then once you really get into romance, you're looking at your gothic romances. So set in the 18th century, these are probably in some sort of castle or manor. There's usually a horror element and maybe some sort of mystery, like maybe, you know, like think a romantic Dracula. That would be like a gothic romance where maybe the like owner of the manor is very mysterious, but they're having some sort of romance. Regency romances. This is 19th century royalty, usually in England and usually under your bodice ripper. So now, if we're talking romance, we have to talk tropes. These are the things that are in books that drive the plot or help the plot along, that basically set up what kind of romance you are reading. So first we have friends to lovers. Obviously this one is, first they're friends. They are usually like best friends for a very long time, and then one of them develops feelings and they find out that it's not unrequited love and they start dating for one reason or another. Sometimes it's a fake relationship, sometimes it's a real relationship, but however it goes, they end up starting a romance. Fake dating, these are the people who pretend to date for some sort of reason, like in Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. Travis and Georgie fake date so that her family takes her more seriously because she's never been in a relationship. And then usually it develops into a very real relationship. Then we have enemies to lovers. These are one of my favorite kind of books where they kind of, I don't want to say they hate each other. Sometimes they really are truly enemies and they hate each other and they learn to love each other because of extenuating circumstances. Or they just don't know each other very well and they think they hate each other, and then they get to know each other and they really love each other and they're kind of the other's perfect match. One that you really see a lot in bodice rippers and your Regency, marriage of convenience or an arranged romance. So arranged marriage, not arranged romance. So arranged marriages, obviously they're set up by other people and they have to marry each other for some reason. Marriage of convenience is when there's something happening that someone has to get married or something else will happen. Like some sort of circumstance of them not getting married will happen and they don't want that circumstance. So a lot of the times this is a duke marrying someone because they're to produce an heir, and you know, them getting married will at least get people off their back for a while, or there's some sort of monetary gain by them getting married. Like someone won't get their inheritance until they get married. That's when you see a lot. First, proximity trope, which I think this is one of the most popular that people really like to read. This is where two people are forced to live in the same house, the same room. Usually the one bed trope comes into this section. This is where there's only one bed in a hotel room because the hotel made a mistake, or you know, there's only one bed because they have to, because they're fake dating and people expect them to sleep in the same bed, and then, you know, they snuggle and it's wonderful and they fall in love. But forced proximity, they're with each other all the time. They see each other. They cannot escape each other. Therefore, they kind of, you know, find out that they really do like / love each other. My least favorite trope, but some people like it, is the accidental pregnancy trope. I'm not a big fan of this one. This is basically, you know, two people get together and there's an accidental pregnancy, and then that keeps them together, or they break up after and it brings them back together. Just not my favorite. The second chance romance. This is, they were a couple at some point and broke up, and now they are rekindling their romance. You see this one in a lot of adult romances where they were together when they were maybe teenagers and broke up for whatever reason, and then in adulthood they get back together. Your workplace romance, this is the hating game. This is, they work together, it's secretive. This is your Jim and Pam romance of the world. And then you obviously have your royalty / rich trope. This is where you get the billionaires, sometimes the secret billionaires, who end up in a relationship, and them being royalty / rich plays into it in some way. Grumpy sunshine trope. It's usually the guy, but I've seen a lot more where it's the girl who's grumpy. Basically, one person doesn't love love. They're grumpy. They don't want, you know, they just kind of have like a glass half empty outlook, and they end up with someone who is like sunshine in a person. They are positive all the time. They are generally happy and like really energetic, and it's that opposites attract sort of thing. Then you have the insta love. This is, they meet and boom, instant fireworks. They fall in love. They jump into a relationship. Bing, bang, boom, done. Like it's off and running. Slow burn. Everyone loves a good slow burn. This is usually in a series or a really long book. So this would be like, there's a slow burn in The Bone Witch, where we meet them in the first book and we can kind of know that they're going to end up together and you want them together so bad, but it takes, 500 pages for them to even have any sort of romantic reaction to the other or kiss or anything of that nature. Now that we have all of the tropes out of the way, let's talk about the kinds of, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, lovers that you can have in your book. You have the alpha. Usually you see these in like werewolf or some sort of like otherworldly creature romances. Usually a male who just exudes the toxic masculinity. They're controlling, they're overprotective, they're very like domineering, they're very physical people. You see them a lot. Then you have the beta hero, which is your funny guy. They're not the alpha. They're not getting in everyone's face. They're not trying to prove anything. They are just like the good guy. And not saying that that's like, these terms do not apply to real life, okay? But in the book world, this is just how it's classified. Cinnamon roll. This is the soft, gooey, warm-hearted, wholesome, genuinely really nice guy who just, exudes, think Hallmark movie men, like just squishy, soft, smiley, wonderful people. Of course, you can always have the really smart, snarky kind of person. They are going to challenge the main character at every single point they get. Like whoever their love interest is, they're going to pick, they're going to needle at them, they're going to, nothing ever like mean. It's all done in good fun, but they're just gonna like banter and poke at them. Think like Thomas Cresswell and Audrey Rose in Stalking Jack the Ripper. And then, like I said before, you have your billionaire slash kings. Usually they kind of throw their wealth around. They, let people know that they are of importance, and they are showering the other person with, gifts and, trips, all those kind of things. Let's talk about the kinds of relationships. Obviously, you can have like one-and-one, and like, you have your polyamorous relationship where everybody is in love with each other, and that's how the relationship works. But you also have your classic love triangles or your love lines. So in most books, even though they'll be classified as a love triangle, it's actually a love line. So let me get visual with you here. You'll have a main character who loves one person, and then who loves this person, and this person loves the main character. But then you have another person who loves your main character, and they also think that they may love them. That is a love line because these two don't love each other in any way, shape, or form. They are just interested in the same person. Then you have a true love triangle. This is when you have a main character and they are in love with this person, but this person is in love with this person, but this person is also in love with this person. So no one is actually in love with the other unless, this person is in love with this person, but she's also in love with this person, but might be in love with this person. Does that make sense? Now we have to talk about the way people rate their books. Some people use spice or heat level to talk about the amount of on-page lovemaking that there is, coitus that is on the page. I'm trying to use words that will not get this video taken down. How much of it is on the page? How graphic are we getting? So I personally use 3 categories. I use spice, which is, it's on the page. There's some explanation, description, but it never gets overly graphic. But it's happening and it's happening. Then you have your smut. This is where there is no detail spared. On page, in your face, this is what's happening. we're gonna talk about it, you're gonna hear about it sort of encounters. Or you have your fade to black. This is where it's about to happen, you know what's going to happen, and then, you know, we jump to the next chapter. It's the next morning, it's a few hours later, etc. This is the ... effect from like Mamma Mia when they're reading the journal. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, or, you know, one is the right way to do it. You can write romance using any of these three, or absolutely no sex at all in your romance. There doesn't need to be. YA, there is usually never. The next thing that you're going to hear people talk about a lot is the third act. And a third act can make or break a romance book. So this contains your breakup, your makeup, your basically your conclusion to this relationship, however it's going to end. Usually you're looking at no more than 100 pages for your third act. So I find especially like Tessa Bailey, Talia Hibbert, like all these kind of new romance authors, well, they're not new romance authors, they've been writing for a long time, but these ones who are really popular right now are between 30 to 100 pages. Your third act, if it gets much longer than that, I've noticed people lose interest very quickly and do not care if they get together, or if they just feel it's very drawn out. And this is usually, you know, your happily ever after, or your, you know, your conclusion in some way, even if they don't end up together. Well, let's talk about the types of breakups that you're going to see in your third act. I just picked a handful that I have noticed usually drive a breakup. The miscommunication trope. My God, I'm sick of it. Usually it's just because of someone didn't say something, someone wasn't clear on their intentions, and it causes a miscommunication and they separate for the time. Then you have cheating, pretty explanatory. Forced apart. This is usually where you see like a war happens and the couple is split up by that war, or, you know, a parent says you're not allowed to be together anymore. Romeo and Juliet-esque. Then you have the for your own good. This means that one of the protagonists says, you know, you can't be with me, I'm just not, like, you deserve better, like, I'm breaking up with you for your own good. You'll see in 10 years that I'm right. And they never are. The better off as friends. They just decide, you know what, this isn't working, I think we should just be friends. And then proximity changes. So those forced proximity, they are, you know, moved out into separate houses. They don't have to keep up this ruse anymore. And so they kind of lose that magic that was keeping them together. Now let's talk about your makeups. For the miscommunication one, they have a conversation. Oh my God. Like adults, they talk and they communicate and then everything is fine. Mind-blowing. Then you have the grand gesture. This is usually in public. They make kind of this big scene, let the world know that they love this person. A child brings them together. This is like the accidental pregnancy kind of thing. All is forgiven. You know, they cheated on you and you forgive them for whatever reason. Cool. Proximity change. Again, they're forced back together, or they're so close now it's hard for them to resist the other. Returning from war, obviously a big one. They defy their parents or disown their family or renounce their throne. Again, you see these a lot in Regency romances where they say they don't care about their inheritance, the money's not worth it, they want to be with the person they love. Someone realizes their mistake. They realize that they're an idiot and they should have never broken up with the person in the first place, and they go back to them. And then the last one is gets out of their own way. The person kind of, you know, sometimes the characters go to therapy. Sometimes they just have this awakening where someone kind of smacks them upside the head and is like, you know, you're sabotaging the relationship yourself. Go fix it. Now let's talk about some recommendations. So for romance books that I just really love, first we have one that deals with chronic illness. It's a contemporary, and depending on how you look at it, could be inspirational, even though there's no real faith element to it. Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This one, we have an interracial couple. We have, you know, like I said, Chloe has chronic illness and Red tries to help her through it. I'm trying to think of tropes in here. I would say probably friends to lovers is a good trope for this one, but one of my very favorites, if you're interested, one that is a series and is a somewhat slow burn speculative series, Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. You know, this is Amelia getting involved with, now it's not her main like focal point, but the romance is pretty important, getting involved with Wrath, who is a demon, and going to hell. So this is fantasy and kind of speculative romance. Another contemporary that is fake dating, Fix Her Up. I talked about this one already, one of my favorites. And a second chance romance, Love Her or Lose Her. This is a married couple who ends up splitting up and getting back together, all within this book, or finding out if they do get back together or if they're better off on their own. From Blood and Ash. This one I would say is definitely a true fantasy romance. Like, the romance is so important throughout the entire book. And that is basically it. There's no shame in liking romance. It is no different than liking rom-com movies or watching a movie with a sex scene in it. It really isn't. And instead of looking at it, you're just reading it. So do not feel ashamed of reading any of these books. Be proud and know that there's a big community out there for you who love, love, love romance novels. So I will see you guys in the next one, and happy reading.